Hi, I'm Maryann Sasaki. Welcome to Life in the Law. We are really lucky to have the guest we have today. We have Ms. Linda Paul, who is an environmental attorney, and she practices in so many areas and does so many things. I doubt that we'll have enough time to cover them all, but maybe we'll have time to cover some of the things you've been doing. So thanks for coming, Linda.
Oh, well, I'm happy to be here and to be on the show. Thank you.
Good. I wanted to speak about what you were talking about, your presentation for the CAP, Council for Security Cooperation in Asia. Did I get that?
Oh, close enough.
P.
Council for Security Cooperation in Asia.
Okay. And that's to preserve the reefs in
Well, this
Manila?
this is a working group meeting of the maritime part, and it was held a couple of weeks ago in Manila. And the idea of having this particular meeting was to identify certain gaps in, how the whole region is managed internationally and how it cooperates and what are the problems and that sort of thing. But this was a sort of an unusual meeting because it tended to focus on coral reefs for a change.
That's interesting. Why are coral reefs so important? Can you tell me? I mean, I know they are, but because they're the home of biodiverse wildlife. Is that why? I mean, what purpose do they serve?
Well, in Southeast Asia, there's an area called the Coral Triangle, which covers all the way from the eastern part of the Solomon Islands, then west to Vietnam, and then north up to the end of the Philippines up north. Basically, it's a hugely diverse tropical coral reef system. I think 35% of all the species on the coral reef species on the planet are in this area.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's been hit hard by sea level warming. So what's going on is what they call a bleaching effect. And coral, when you see corals on the reef, it looks like flowers or plants or something, right?
Right.
Well, those are actually animals with a calcium hard skeleton to them. But what gives them, and the calcium's white, but what gives them color is that they have this, what they call a symbiotic relationship with these little microscopic cell, no larger than a cell, algae.
I vaguely remember this from high school. Yes, that's
so
right, yeah.
They help the algae helps them, right? Well, if it gets too hot, the algae jump ship, basically.
Oh, okay.
And that's what makes the...
So then their spine show, that you see
Then you
right
see all the
through
white.
them. Yeah.
But the animal is still there. It just doesn't have the colors that are in the algae.
Does the animal or the coral reef, does it suffer when it's bleached? I mean, does it not perform a function that it would normally perform, or is
Right. It just it probably stops growing for one thing,
Okay.
and it can come back. In other words, new little algae cells can come back into it if the sea level change in temperature doesn't last much longer than a couple of years. Then it won't.
But what's the likelihood, I mean, of it not lasting? I mean, is it permanently raised, do you think? I mean, isn't it?
No, well, yes. Well, it depends, of course.
Okay.
But one of the things that can happen is that, and one of the reasons I was talking about a particular gap, which is the need for large marine protected areas, is when you have a large marine protected area. In Hawaii, we have one in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, which is 1,200 miles long. A reef's actually not flat, as you know. It's got depth to it. So you can have live corals further down in the water column that are not as badly impacted by the change in that hot water on top. And they can basically help the reef restore itself.
So how would you, so obviously you're sort of working toward international environmental law, like a consistent international environmental law when you say a gap, right? There's a gap in how the environment is treated, right? What's the gap?
Well, in the Coral Triangle,
it's not an actual gap, right? In coral, but you know.
No, the gap would be a policy management gap.
Right. So how would you propose to influence? I mean, how do we influence other countries or other regions with respect to the importance of environmental controls? I mean, how does one do that?
Well, this particular meeting, and it actually is what they call second track diplomacy, had a lot of representatives from a lot of governments there.
Oh,
The Philippines, People's Republic of China, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia, and so on.
so everybody acknowledges the importance of the endeavor.
Everybody was there, and like Australia has, as you certainly know, from the Great Barrier Reef is a very large marine ecosystem. It's
Right.
a World Heritage Site, just
Right.
like the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands is. That doesn't protect it from climate change and hot water, though,
Right,
unfortunately.
that was my concern. I'm not a scientist, but I do know a little bit about climate change.
Well, how this relates together is if you protect a large system like that, in other words, you keep the stresses on it, the man-made stresses on it down, it gives it more resiliency. It can come back easier. If you're already stressing it with oil spills and
you're taking care of
overfishing
it,
and
I
all
mean,
those
yeah,
things,
you're
right?
tending it.
It's already stressed,
Right.
and the chances of it coming back are smaller, right?
Right. So it's a housekeeping or taking care of, a
Right.
minding of our environment.
Right.
So, how did you become involved? Well, let me just say, Linda is a very experienced attorney, and she does what, in my view, is the most difficult thing, which is she's a sole practitioner, and she practices on the right side of the law, meaning she does stuff for the public good. So, what led you to environmental law, and what gave you the courage to do it by yourself? I mean, I need a firm, otherwise I'm afraid.
Well, I've changed careers a few times in my life. I started out as a United States Foreign Service officer.
Oh.
And then I married myself out of that job because this was a long time ago when it was difficult to stay married and be in the Foreign Service. It was like being in the military. You went where you were told.
Right.
So I went back to school at the University of Hawaii and got a master's in zoology because I'd always liked rummaging around on tide pools because I grew up in Southern California. And I also liked fishing with my dad. So after I got that degree, I liked research, and I did my research up in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands on the spiny lobster population up there.
How is the spiny lobster population
It's
up
dead
there?
and gone, and it's
Really?
gone. Yes.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yes, I was on the very first resource survey cruise up there in the mid-1970s. And when you went on those islands in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, there was no plastic. The most you saw in the way of debris were glass balls that the Japanese used to keep their nets afloat.
The plastic problem is so disturbing. I mean, it's almost impossible to avoid not using plastic, or you have to check products carefully whether there are these little beads of plastic in them. I mean, it's
women's cosmetics are terrible.
I know that.
Microscopic beads.
Yeah.
And you and I are ending up eating them. That's the other thing. It gets in the food chain.
Oh. Ooh,
yeah.
That doesn't sound
the
so
little
good.
fish eat the plastic, and the big fish eat the little fish, and you eat the big fish. And we're eating plastic.
Oh, well, terrific. So that's why I wanted to have you on, for the good news. So when you went to study, were the spiny lobsters there in the 70s? Were they diminishing?
Yes, we found a virgin population of spiny lobsters up there. They'd been fished a little bit, but not much because it's a long ways away. So it was rapidly overfished. And since then, so then they closed it down in the 1990s and said no more fishing for lobsters until it comes back. Well, it never came back. But I am suspicious that actually the climate change and ocean circulation patterns have contributed to the fact that it hasn't come back because...
I can imagine. I mean, it has to be.
The critters have a larval life of about a year, and they get blown by the wind down as far as Johnston Atoll is. Then there's a subsurface current that along the Necker Ridge that brings them back to the Northwestern Islands. And that current has been, the speed and volume and everything's been reduced because of ocean circulation patterns have changed. So,
if there is global warming.
You're a skeptic?
No, not at all. That was just a joke. That was my poor attempt at a joke. So you studied zoology, went to study the spiny lobster, and how did you get to law?
After that, I went and worked for UH Press in their marketing department and had a bad experience with my boss and decided I did not want to become a victim again.
Oh.
So I applied to law school.
I think that's true of a lot of people. I mean, I know that certainly when I went to law school, I viewed it as an empowering event, you know,
Yep.
that I'd be able to understand the law and thereby influence my surroundings in a way that I wouldn't be able to if I didn't do it.
Yes, there were several women in my class at UH Law School that were there for the same reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it sort of, it raises your consciousness, and then once that happens, you know, everything, you know, anything can happen.
Right.
So you went to UH, and you were a little older than the rest of the students. I'm assuming.
Not the oldest, though.
No. and how did the other? I was also a returning student, and I actually felt very odd in my class. Did you feel? Were you part of the cohort, or did you feel a little bit, you know, different than your classmates?
My particular class was actually pretty diverse in terms of age. I mean, we had the usual group of students that had just come out of undergraduate and went to law school, which, by the way, I think is not a good idea for anybody who's thinking about going to law school.
Absolutely not.
Takes a little life experience before you figure out why the law is needed.
Absolutely. So we're going to take a quick break now. We're going to come back and return to how Linda started her practice and continuing to inquire why she started her practice. And you're watching Life in the Law with Maryann Sasaki.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage on the Think Tech Hawaii Digital Network. On Center Stage, every Wednesday at 2 p.m., we talk to artists of all different ilk, playwrights, novelists, poets, singers, sculptors, you name it. We've had all kinds of interesting people on, and we always talk about what they do and how they do it. And what I find most interesting, we talk about why they do what they do, the process of art, what it does for us and our humanity. I hope that you will come and join us, and maybe you'll get inspired to bring out your creative spirit as well. That's Center Stage on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock on the Think Tech Hawaii Digital Network.
Aloha, my name is Richard Emery, and I host Condo Insider. We talk about issues facing the condo association throughout Hawaii and talk about solutions. When you think about it, about 1/3 of our population lives in some form of common interest real estate. We broadcast every Thursday at 3 p.m. Please tune in, and thank you. Aloha.
States in the
Welcome back.
mid-19th century.
Linda and I were just continuing to talk into break as because we're friends, obviously, and we are engaged in each other's life tremendously. Linda was telling me that she clerked for Tink Riston, is that right?
Tink Ashford.
Tink Ashford, okay. And he was the Supreme Court
He was
Justice.
the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the Marshall Islands at the time.
So what kinds of work did you do there? I mean, what kind of cases did he hear?
It was fighting over reparations. As you know, we did nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands a
Right.
long time ago. And the United States has been making reparation payments as a result. So, and there was a fight over who got the money. Because they have, it's an interesting system in the Marshall Islands. They have sort of a dual legal system. They have their traditional tribal legal system, and then they have a U.S. type constitution that was
that's
written by Lawrence Tribe of Harvard Law School.
Oh, okay.
Who
I
decided,
know.
it's interesting because he decided he'd pattern after the U.S. Constitution, but he'd sort of fix it.
Oh, okay.
So for one thing he did is he incorporated the Bill of Rights into the Constitution as opposed to having it separate, right? So, but there were a few things that he didn't
He
quite
got wrong?
fix.
What did he get wrong in the...
But in order for us to make decisions on these cases, these kinds of decisions were made in our country way back 150 years ago, in 1850s. All these things came up. They haven't come up around here, but they came up there.
Right.
So, but anyway, to get back into your question about what did they fight about, what were the issues, they would, if a person wanted an outboard motor boat,
Okay.
to get across the lagoon and go fish. And if the chief of his tribe in that area wouldn't give him that out of the money, then he'd shift systems.
Well,
and
why
he'd-
wouldn't you? I
and
mean,
he'd go
why
over
wouldn't you get a second
He'd
bite
go
at
over to
the
the
apple,
Western
as you say?
system, the one that
Right.
Lawrence Tribe
Right.
designed. So
Right.
that's how, it was fights over money mostly, the reparation money.
And so you clerked for several judges though, didn't you? Or
After Judge Ashford, then I went to clerk for Magistrate Judge Barry Curran for about 15 months.
yeah, I'm really envious that experience. I haven't had that experience, and it seems like such a great way to immerse yourself in the law and have quiet study. But maybe I'm just fantasizing about that. Am I fantasizing?
I loved that job. I loved it. And I do think that that should be the fourth year of law school, basically. I think 3 years of law school and then the fourth year should be clerking.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, because, you often don't know what you don't know. And when I graduated from law school, I certainly didn't realize the value of working closely with a judge within the judicial system. And that would be a terrific idea. I'm sure the judges would like it a lot
Yeah.
too. Except, they couldn't pick and choose, I guess, then who they wanted.
Well, there aren't enough judges to
right, to
provide enough clerk positions. So,
right.
yeah.
But it's that's a great idea. That's terrific. So okay, so zoology, I imagine, brought you to environmental law, the spiny lobsters, and so did you know in law school that that's what you were going to practice, or did it evolve?
I don't think I really thought about it at the time. I know that was always my interest.
Really?
And even after, yes. And I should go back and say that biologically, I come from a very long line of lawyers. On my mother's side, it goes back 250 years.
Wow. I'm impressed.
My father was a lawyer. I've got uncles and cousins that are lawyers.
Does that make it easier?
An ex-husband who was a lawyer.
Yes.
So.
You were surrounded. I'm the first lawyer in my family, so I'm always sort of a little bit envious of people that have this distinctive lineage that they can trace it back 200
Well,
years even.
I wouldn't say it's genetic, and I always resisted going into it.
Right.
But when I got into law school, I discovered I really liked it. I loved law school too. Everybody says, "Won't you be glad when you get out?" I said, "Hey, I'm not wishing my life away." I
No.
took the courses I liked.
I think when you're an adult and you're in law school, that's one reason you shouldn't go straight from college, because you find out how horrible the real world is, and law school all of a sudden is like comforting, cosseting environment whereby you can just study and if you do X, Y will result, which of course is not like real life at all, right?
Right.
So did you start as a sole practitioner right out the gate? You didn't?
No, I did because I couldn't. I had family issues
Right.
that I had to attend to
Right.
on the mainland, so it involved a lot of back and forth. I sort of practiced, I did advocacy on the side. I did a lot of lobbying for environmental groups at the legislature, for example. I wrote legislation. I did a little contract work for several different attorneys in town.
See, I think this is great for young lawyers to hear, because young lawyers are so often fixated on the idea of a big law firm and a big paying job, and the future is set, and I know what I'm going to do for the next 20 years. And it doesn't have to be that way at all. My background isn't that way, and yours isn't that way.
Right.
And you survive, you grow. I think it might be a little stultifying to be in a law firm, a big law firm from 22 to 72 or whatever. It keeps you doing lots of different kinds of things. Keeps you agile. Keeps you intellectually agile.
Right.
So you wrote legislation, environmental legislation, or?
Yes, I actually had one piece of legislation that was introduced into the U.S. Congress by Representative Case.
Oh, really? Well, do tell.
And that was on the northwestern Hawaiian Islands.
Oh, yes?
So he said he wanted to create the largest marine protected area in the United States, and he said he had 3 requirements that the legislation should have in it. It wanted to be the biggest, it wanted to have no fishing, and he wanted to steer clear of other jurisdictions, meaning Fish and Wildlife Service, state jurisdiction, that kind of thing. He says, but after that, you can play God and do whatever you want with this piece of legislation.
That sounds terrific.
It was very fun. So Ann Stewart, who is his chief legislative aide, and I we put it together, and then I sat down in his office and he grilled me for a long, long time. Why did you do this? What is this? What does this mean? So on and so forth, before I introduced it.
Crafting legislation is not easy. I mean, I don't know that I could even, I did it in law school and I found it, really hard, but that was my first year of law school. I don't know that I could really account for all the tangent possibilities of what one law might, then the ripple effect and what would occur as a consequence of my one provision that I think is a fantastic provision, and then all of a sudden it turns out that it ruffles some feathers somewhere else,
Yeah.
so.
So you're going to ask me what happened to that legislation? aren't you?
I'm going to. I was just about to.
What happened to that legislation? It was in Congress chugging along, and that was 2006. And at the same time that was going on, the Coral Reef Ecosystem Reserve, which was established by President Clinton under executive order, was in the business and in the midst of transitioning to a national marine sanctuary. And it had already drafted a draft management plan and a draft environmental impact statement, and that was about to go out for public comment. But in June of 2006, President George W. Bush had a really bad day in Iraq and needed some good PR. And his staff, he was supposed to sign the approval for the draft environmental impact statement to go out for public review and comment.
Right.
And instead, within 2 to 3 days, he had his White House lawyers convert this draft management plan into a proclamation.
Oh, wow.
And he created the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands Marine National Monument, which is now the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. And signed that. I was in the White House when he signed it. So now we have a monument up there, and the legislation went away.
Well, you were just, is this the monument we were talking about earlier today?
Yes.
So you're talking about lobbying for the monument, and I just explain what that is and what you're trying to do, and what's the struggle there?
Well, I'm on an advisory council, and advisory council is not allowed to lobby, just like a federal employee is not allowed to lobby. We can lobby as individuals, but we can't wear our advisory council hats when we do that. And the reason that the question came up is because of Henderson Airfield up in Midway. Henderson Airfield is a full-size, at least in length, airfield that was put there by the Navy. And the Navy turned the at Midway Atoll over to the Fish and Wildlife Service.
Oh, okay.
Department of Interior. Airfield went with it. But this airfield needs to stay operating and maintained, and the fuel tanks need to be filled, and there needs to be a communication system up there because it is used by commercial airliners. If they get in trouble when they're transiting across the Pacific, they can land there. And this happens more often than you would think.
Really? I
Yes.
think I saw a presentation about this recently, actually, that, is it destined to stay an airstrip, or are there people that want to do something else with the land?
Well, the issue is money.
Okay.
Because when they had the 2011 tsunami from Japan, it damaged one side of the airfield, seawall that keeps the place intact. And Fish and Wildlife Service, there have been appropriations by Congress over the years to the FAA to operate this airfield. But those appropriations always just seem to cover just the operations, and they don't allow
for reconstruction.
Or renovation. There was one year where the Boeing Corporation actually contributed $3 million to it because it thought it was important for its commercial airliners to be able to.
Sure.
And I think that's where the lobbying effort needs to be made, because there needs to be some kind of partnership between the airlines and the federal government to maintain this airfield, because they need it.
Right.
They've got some skin in the game, so to speak.
You would approach companies to sort of sponsor? I mean, how would a private-public, joint effort? What would it look like?
Well, you would have an agreement.
Mm-hmm. I'm lobbying it.
I mean, there are many, many such agreements in this country between private industry and the government, partnerships. We have them in the state between private organizations.
That's true.
and the
I know.
state.
I have a case, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
So That's interesting, and how things get done. I'm still learning, at least specifically in Hawaii, how things get done. And even when you describe the places you're describing, I'm sort of know where, I know our audience will know, but I'm still a little bit, don't know the islands so well. So, can you tell us about your most recent victory, or if you want, your most recent defeat? It's your choice, or your most interesting recent case. What have you been working on?
The most interesting recent case was, of course, the decision the Supreme Court made last year on involved the Keolia Corporation and the building of a tower on Waikiki Beach. And I took that case in behalf of 4 environmental organizations, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court agreed with us 5-0, so it was a nice win.
That's how you want to go, definitely.
Yeah.
So it's not going up, but there's so much construction. I mean, it seems like there's tons of choices of towers that can be stopped. I mean, somebody's got to stop all the towers, right? I mean,
That's right. And this particular tower, the case for people who are not familiar with this, the Moana Hotel, the Surfrider Tower, and adjacent on the Diamond Head side of the mall is an 8-story building.
Right.
All 3 of those buildings are out of code, but they were grandfathered in when, in the middle of the 1970s, they did the Waikiki Special District, which is a set of ordinances which basically says certain things will happen in this area. And one of them is that there's a mandatory coastal setback, both width-wise and height-wise, to stay away from the ocean, because it's dangerous. If you're down on the beach and you've got a high-rise that's 40 feet away from you and somebody's having a party up there on the 12th floor and starts flipping beer bottles over the, it's dangerous.
But they were grandfathered in, so they didn't have to.
Well, their the ordinance specifies that you can renovate these hotels, and you can even keep them at their non-compliant status, but you can't increase the amount of non-compliance. And in this particular case, the landowner wanted to increase the amount of non-compliance. He wanted to take this 8-story annex and basically make it go up over 300 feet.
What's 8 stories? 8 stories is nothing. It's not worth your while.
It was 74.3% in violation of the coastal setback ordinance, and they got all the variances. So the question is, were they
get the variances? How'd they do that?
Well, they didn't follow the rules.
Let's take a break and let's hear what it is they did to get the variances. This is Life in the Law. I'm Maryann Sasaki. I'm here today with Linda Paul, and we'll be right back.
Okay, this is Think Tech Hawaii, and it's Wednesday. Every Wednesday is Energy Wednesday here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy. 4 to 5 p.m. every Wednesday. Come and listen to us. And just to show you what I mean, I'm going to ask Sharon to tell us more.
Come and see us every Wednesday, as Jay said. And we have people like Jim Albers from HECO here, and co-host Ray Starling here every Wednesday. We not only go on Olelo and OC16, but also stream live. So please come visit us, hear about the latest in clean energy.
Okay, Jim, you've been here. You got any comment on all this?
As important as energy is in all of our lives today, this is a great forum and a great format to vet those issues. So I encourage everybody to listen in and participate.
Okay, Ray, what do you think for a close?
Well, I think this is the greatest show in the energy world here in Hawaii. You can come here every week, 1 hour, and catch the latest on what's happening and hear from the people who really know what's going on, like Jim Alberts. We appreciate your coming today.
Thank you.
Ray Starling, Sharon Moriwaki, Jim Alberts, and Jay Fidel here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy. 4 to 5 p.m. Wednesday. Aloha.
Aloha.
Well, thank you for appearing today, Linda. I want to continue our discussion with just a little bit of how they, how they sort of swam through the variances and were able to, get the kinds of variances. Was it really just kind of business as usual in Hawaii?
Well, the city charter has a variance test. It has 3 parts to it.
Uh-huh.
But basically, one of the tests is that you have to be denied, what it says on the face of the ordinance is you have to be denied reasonable use. So they said, okay, we're denied reasonable use because basically we could make more money if we built it bigger.
I was going to say 8 stories isn't reasonable enough, apparently.
So there's a footnote under this test, however, based on a previous Supreme Court decision. And that, in turn, that decision was based on Lucas v. South Carolina, a U.S. Supreme Court decision, which basically says the test is any reasonable use, not just a reasonable use.
Oh, that's not good.
And they didn't make a case for they would be denied any. They had 3 revenue-generating hotels on their
Right,
property, so obviously they weren't denied any reasonable
And now
use.
you were telling me during the break that they're trying to change the ordinance so that
There's a proposed city charter amendment that basically would say, well, you're excused from the whole variance test if it's impractical.
well, an argument can always be made for that impracticality.
It certainly can, and basically, if it gets all the way to a referendum with the voters, it will do away with ordinances. Basically, it will mean anything goes. Ordinances mean nothing.
Right, you can always make that. You can always make that argument.
You can always make that argument.
So, what stage is it in now? Where is it?
The Charter Commission just heard the arguments, took public testimony on whether or not it should be a ballot.
Were you
measure.
there? Did you testify, or did you?
My clients did.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, I knew you'd be involved. So, well, if you had to advise a young lawyer who wanted to embark on environmental law, wanted to embark on a career in environmental law, how would you advise the lawyer? What would you advise them to do? Where would they start? I mean, you can't do it at a big firm, right? Because a big firm, you'll learn environmental law, but you'll learn it from the wrong side, right? You'll learn it from the developer's side, or not that it's the wrong side, but the side that different from we're talking about.
Well, it is hard to be a citizen advocate because I have the luxury of not needing to work full time at this task. What a lot of firms do is if a young lawyer comes on board and he's interviewing, they will have a discussion about how much work he can do pro bono, because that's where most of the environmental law work is done. It's done pro bono.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So the big firms are doing their part for the public good. And
Yes.
allowing young lawyers to get experience at the same
That's
time.
right. My ex-husband argued the Waiholi ditch case, which was a water case, on a pro bono basis for Hawaii's Thousand Friends.
Okay, what's the Waiholi dish case? I have no idea. I'm here a year, and
Oh, this is, well,
I wouldn't know it if I was 10 years, I don't think.
a while ago, as you probably know, there were a lot of sugarcane fields in central Oahu.
That I know.
Okay, sugarcane takes a lot of water. And that water was coming from Windward Oahu and going through tunnels to Leeward Oahu to feed the sugarcane fields. When sugar was phased out, there was a lot of water still going through the mountain. And these citizens and communities over in Windward Oahu wanted that water back
Well,
for
sure.
their taro farms and everything else. So that was the case, whether that water should go back.
They fought over water.
They fought over water.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the movie The Big Short, but there's an analyst in that movie who was right about the housing market bust, and he insists that the next big fight in environmental fight is going to be the fight over water. He's betting that water issues are going to be significant issues in the coming century, where there's not going to be, people just won't be able to use water in the way they are accustomed to using them. Have you ever encountered or other?
Yes, I think that's correct. The reason I went to that CSCAP meeting was because I happened to be director of the Ocean Law and Policy Institute at the Pacific Forum, CSIS.
So I see.
And the reason I am director of that institute is because when the Cold War was over, CSIS decided that the next wars were going to be fought over resources, water, food, all of that sort of thing.
Right.
So they established the Environmental Policy Institute. I later, when I joined it, added the word law to it. So I was its third director. Its first director was Mel Peterson, Dr. Peterson, who was the former chief scientist of NOAA. And then there was a Dutch lawyer who was the second one, and I was the third. So that's actually why so it's a security issue.
Right.
The environment, and that's the reason I just gave this talk on marine protected areas and the challenges.
Sure. Well, that makes complete sense, yeah.
Yeah.
So how big a group is this? Is this like a large group, the Ocean Law and Institute
So
of
it's an institute of one. I'm it.
I was wondering. I didn't want, I sort of didn't want to ask, but I didn't. I wanted
CSIS
to
is very
hope
big.
that it wasn't. I wanted to say,
This is.
oh yes, we have
This
a
is a
staff
very
of
small
20.
part of a much larger organization.
Yeah.
CSIS is big. You see it on the news at night. People interview.
Right.
And Pacific Forum is reasonably large. And so this is just a small part of Pacific Forum.
You need to get some interns to help you and do your work. You need some
Well,
interns from the law school.
it does stuff when I go out and raise money for it. And the last thing we did was we did a marine debris conference at the state capitol in the fall of 2013, and a Pacific Rim marine debris conference. So we brought people in from Asia and from Canada.
A marine debris conference? I guess you talked a lot about plastic during that conference.
Yeah, what we talked about was, and what caused it to happen was the tsunami. Because in 2011, when that tsunami sent all that debris into the ocean, there was no emergency contingency plan for trying to capture that debris before it went all over the ocean. So it went all over the ocean.
Wow. You don't even think about that. You think about all these lives that are lost, and you think about the damage to the buildings and how they're going to rebuild, but you don't really think about the flotsam and jetsam of the that comes from such a huge event, right? And so were they able to clean up they're
still cleaning it up. It separated itself, as you can imagine. The light stuff floated on top, and then it's got heavier, but it still got moved around. Alaska got the brunt of all of the light stuff because the currents in the North Pacific just took it right up along the coast of Alaska. I mean, I think they're still 4 feet deep in debris from that.
But how would you prevent that? I mean, how could you possibly? I mean, you'd have an operation, and I mean, I don't. How?
Well,
one
of the means that was suggested was using fishing nets and fishing trawlers and barges.
Really, something is
and just
as
surround
fundamental
it.
as that.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't get it all, but you'd get some.
Right at the beginning, particularly before it
spread around.
Spreads around.
Right.
Oh, that's technology I can understand, because it just seems like such a huge problem, and you don't know, it could happen anywhere, and so. I mean, I'm not sure what kind of precautions could have been put into place, but a big net, I understand, yeah.
Well, a lot of people chipping in and helping.
Right. So, is there anything you would like to speak about? Is there any burning is there any burning issue that you're involved in now, or a legal issue that you think is significant? I'm a cannabis. My practice is medical marijuana, and I'm a member of the National Cannabis Bar Association, which I'm very proud of. But so, is there something right now that's right at the front on your front burner, environmentally?
I did not, when I went into environmental law, I did not intend to go into land use law. And that is pretty much what my practice is right now. And it's mainly in reaction. Communities and neighbors are getting very upset about when the development goes in next to them.
It must be so hard to represent the community, that's upset, that's agitated, and a lot of different opinions. I can imagine.
That's what I ended up doing.
So you're part lawyer, part psych counselor to the calming down the fears and worries.
Well, you have to not mind working with associations of residents and landowners.
Right, and they're not professional. They're not.
Hey, they're great people. They help.
Right.
They say, okay, I'll help you, and I don't charge them very much. But I said, you have to help me do the work. You got to do a lot of the grunt work, the groundwork, the finding of facts work for this case, and they do. So,
I think you should be on the cover of, I don't know, Honolulu magazine or something as a hero. I mean, you're a hero. This kind of
I don't
work.
know about that.
I think so. I mean, you dedicated your life to it, and you've made progress, and I'm so happy to have had you come here and tell us about it. I'm proud and happy to have you as a friend. It's
Well,
just,
thank you for asking me. I appreciate
it's been
being
great.
asked.
It's just been great. So you're watching, or you have watched Live in the Law with Maryann Sasaki. I thank my guest, Linda Paul. We're on Wednesdays 1 to 2. I hope you'll join us next week when we will have children's abuse rights, people that work with abused children. So that should be a very interesting program.
You're watching Think Tech Hawaii, 25 talk shows by 25 dedicated hosts every week, helping us explore and understand the issues and events in and affecting our state. Great content for Hawaii from Think Tech.